Hello and welcome to this episode. My name is Audrey Shaw, the TrueSport Outreach Education Program Lead. At TrueSport, our mission is simple and bold: to change the culture of youth sport by providing powerful educational tools to equip young athletes with the resources to build life skills and core values for success on and off the field. Founded on the three cornerstones of sportsmanship, character building and life skills, and clean and healthy performance, TrueSport aims to partner with extraordinary organizations like the Taylor Hooton Foundation to promote a more positive youth sport experience. We hope you'll enjoy this collaborative mini-series between TrueSport and the Taylor Hooton Foundation on the All Me podcast. And we hope you'll use the information presented by subject experts and world-class athletes to go out and make a difference in the lives of your young athletes.
Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the All Me podcast. This is Don Hooton Jr., and today I'll be your host. In this series we put together in partnership with TrueSport, you've heard from many experts and even some professional athletes. We're excited to continue this TrueSport series with three amazing guests. Today, I'll have a chance to interview three Paralympians: Scheidies, Trevon Jenifer, and Tyler Carter. By 2016, the Summer Paralympics included 22 sports and 526 events, with the Winter Paralympics including 5 sports and 72 events. For many years, I've been a big fan of the Paralympics, and so as you can imagine, I'm really excited to share this interview with you today. During this interview, Aaron, Trey, and Tyler are going to discuss a variety of topics, including what the Paralympics are, how has the perception of Paralympic athletes changed over the years, and what changes still need to be made for them to say that there's equity in sport. I was most excited to hear about what their training regimens are like and what some of the biggest challenges they've faced. You're going to love what they have to say. Thank you for tuning in to listen to this episode, which is part of our TrueSport series. I know you're going to learn a lot from the amazing guests that TrueSport has lined up for us to interview. Please consider making a donation to the Taylor Hooton Foundation so that we can continue to deliver our important messages around the world. It's time to get to one of the interviews I've been so excited to record. Let's now hear from Aaron, Trey, and Tyler. It's my honor to welcome three amazing world-class athletes to the All Me podcast. Aaron, Trevon, and Tyler, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us on the All Me podcast for this TrueSport series.
Hey, thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. You guys are awesome. And I've been a fan of Paralympic sports, even back at my days when I attended University of Texas at Arlington, watching the moving Mavs. And today I have the unique opportunity to have three of the top U.S. Paralympic athletes on the show. And it's a real honor and treat to have this discussion with you guys today. I told you how excited I was. And in the introduction, I let our listeners know a little bit about our discussion today and just a little bit about each of you. And to be honest, my resume is pretty frail compared to the three of y'all, so I'm going to let you guys do most of the talking here. But before we get into our discussion, I'd like to learn a little bit more about each of your athletic backgrounds. So if you could tell our listeners a little bit about your athletic career, the sport you compete in, your accomplishments, as well as what you're up to currently. And we'll go in alphabetical order. And let's start with Aaron.
All right, so my name's Aaron Scheidies, and I'm currently a Paralympic triathlete or paratriathlon athlete. But I started out, I'm legally blind. I have about 15 to 20% of my vision left from a progressive eye condition. So I started out actually wanting to be a professional soccer player. I was really good when I was younger at soccer, and that was always my dream. And when you're losing your vision and you can't see the ball and see your teammates very well, it's hard to stay at that level. So I went through some tough times, but got into endurance sports and found triathlon going into my senior year of high school and kind of got hooked, and it really changed my life around and just gave me kind of a sport that I felt that fit having limited vision, and just with having success, I just, and kind of starting off, I was pretty good starting off from my first triathlon relative to everyone else that was competing at that time. That was back in 1999. So, and then some people, I was lucky to be introduced to some people that said, hey, you could, race as an athlete with disability and go to the world championships. And then I started racing with a guide, which is basically my eyes basically makes triathlon a team sport. And from there, I went to Michigan State, and I founded the triathlon club at Michigan State. And, I took my friend up on that opportunity of competing at the world championships. And in 2002, went to my first world championships. And from there, just kept getting better and better, and the sport kept growing and becoming more competitive, but I was still able to stay on top. And unfortunately in 2016, they cut my class, the VI class, out of the Paralympics. So, and that was the first time that triathlon was going to be in the Paralympics. So about a year and a half before that, I decided I'm going to try to go make it on the U.S. team in a different sport. And so I actually had quite a bit of success in some World Cups and things like that in paracycling, and made the paracycling team for 2016 in Rio, and competed there. But it really wasn't my main sport. And so now 2021, really 2020, trying to compete for the Tokyo Paralympics, train for that. Triathlon is in for the blind and vision impaired category, and so that's really where I'm headed, and what I'm training for is the Tokyo Paralympics now. Some of my accomplishments: I'm 8-time world champion in triathlon, and multiple national champion in paracycling as well, and an SP finalist in 2010 for best male athlete with a disability, and part of the Paralympic team, like I said, in Rio, and also looking to move forward and compete in Tokyo.
Man, that is awesome, and we're wishing you nothing but the best of luck. And it looks like you've also had some appearances in GQ and Esquire too. So, like I said, my resume is definitely not like any of the three athletes on here, especially with all the different awards you won. I won an award a couple of years ago for coming last in a golf tournament. So, all right. Well, Trey, why don't we kick it over to you?
Yes, sir. So, again, my name is Trevon Jenifer. I go by Trey. I was born with a disease called congenital phocomelia, and it's this big fancy term for basically I was born without my lower extremities. So I was born without no legs, and I am 1 to 5 to my mother. And, growing up in an alpha athlete household, it was, dog eat dog kind of world. I had 3 brothers and a sister until my stepdad, who I call my dad, came into the picture at the age of 4, and he brought 2 girls as well. So we were a big house of 7, and I'm smack dead in the middle. So if you had any bigger brothers, you got the beating. And then when you know what I'm saying,
yeah,
wanted to beat the little brother and sister, like you're trying to do that as well. So it was awesome to see my brothers and sisters compete, when I was younger, but I wanted to compete as well. And that's when my dad was like, hey, let's get you into track and basketball at the ripe age of 4. And I started at a team right out of Washington, D.C., and it was like, I came up from the not so good parts in Maryland, and I didn't imagine where sports could take me. And so this was my first sight to see sports can take me, out of the city. And so then once I got out of the city, I was able to travel to Pennsylvania and then California. So it was I'm going to different nationals, and I'm doing really well as a youth athlete. And then, 8 years into my wheelchair basketball and track career, my family and the coaching had falling out, and I stopped playing sports for 2 years. And that's kind of where I kind of lost myself, because like I said, I come from a family that's very competitive in everything we do. I mean, we can't, even in our household today, we can't get through a night of tic-tac-toe or Scrabble without, foul words being thrown across the board because we think someone's cheating and this, that, and the fifth. So, so I felt like I lost myself for that time period. And then, my dad moved us out into the country, and he was like, hey, why don't you take up wrestling? And I was like, I don't think wrestling is a sport for me. I'm not sure if I'm with it. And then, I go out for the first open mat, I get pinned in the first like 10 seconds and I'm hooked again. I finished my first season 17 and 18 and 6 in SMAC, which is our like little district or whatever. And then the next year, my coach and we hit the grind, look for things that work for me. We hit the weight room. I was barely 100 pounds soaking wet, wrestling 103. The next year I go 32 and 8, second in SMAC, second in region, and third in the state of Maryland. So there was a big hike. And I was excited, and I just knew that I was going to get like offers to, wrestle for some sort of college. And then, out of nowhere, I got a phone call from Edinboro University of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know, Edinboro University of Pennsylvania is a big D1 wrestling school. Bruce Baumgartner, Louis Roselli, big wrestling names that came out of there. But it was for wheelchair basketball. And he was like, hey, do you want to come play? And at this point, I'm getting ready to graduate from high school. So I was like, yeah, you know what, let's give it. And that is basically all it wrote. I got in, I was, what is this now, 6 years removed at that point. So I was like excited to play. And, I made my first junior national team where we won gold in Paris in 2009. And then my first men's team in 2010. And my first Paralympic Games in 2012. Where we won bronze, and then a gold medal in 2016, and just recently named to the team that's going to Tokyo. So yeah, it's been a lot of sports, but it's all about the competitive atmosphere for me. And I'm just, excited to be able to represent Team USA again for another Paralympic Games.
Man, how exciting. Well, congrats on the gold. Congrats on Tokyo. I know everybody will be excited to watch you on TV and compete. And you had mentioned Pennsylvania. Tyler and I were talking before the call. He's a PA guy. I grew up in PA most of my life. Actually went to high school and college up there, so very familiar with Edinboro. So yeah, but let's go ahead and Tyler, why don't we have you up next?
Sure thing. Yeah. So originally from Pennsylvania. My name's Tyler Carter. I also like to joke I'm the one-legged Captain America. I'm missing my leg below the knee, lost my right leg when I was 1. I was born without my fibula, so I had to have my foot amputated. And I've kind of lived my life and by a pretty simple motto that if anyone tells me I can't do something or they say I have limitations, I'm like, no way. And I'm going to push through them. And I think, all my friends on here as well probably have a similar motto in life. But I really loved Captain America growing up, and no one's fought me for this title yet. So I'm going to continue to maintain I'm the one-legged Captain America until someone challenges me for that title. But, I'm a skier. That's my thing. I love hurling myself down mountains at high speeds, do Alpine skiing. So that encompasses the downhill and Super G, which are the speed events where you're going, 50 plus, usually 60, 70 miles per hour down the hill. Going around the gates, trying to get to the bottom as quick as you can. Also do the giant slalom, which is a little more technical, a little slower speeds, but still a lot of fun. I used to do the slalom, but I don't do that anymore just because that's a lot of effort. And I don't like turning as much. I prefer to go straight. But I've had the honor of representing Team USA twice now in the Paralympics in 2014 in Sochi, Russia. That was my first games. And then I also represented the team in 2018 in Pyeongchang, South Korea. And hopefully everything kind of goes together and I get to do it one more time in Beijing next winter. But it's been a heck of a journey, something I really love. And, it's been a blast going all this way. My first actual kind of experience with the Paralympics was I went to Vancouver on a scholarship in 2010. And that's actually how I was kind of fell in love with this and really committed to this crazy, silly journey of trying to go to the games myself. And that kind of fueled the fire and set me on this path. And, hopefully there's still some amazing things to come. But like I said, love Captain America. And probably the only other thing you need to know about me in life is that I definitely have an ice cream obsession. It's not an addiction because I could stop anytime I want. I just don't want to stop. But, being a gravity sport, as I like to joke, a downhill sport, for me, ice cream is actually a big part of my planning and my nutrition. I know it's, everything in moderation, but I am trying to, get as much mass as I can to go down the hill. And, I think all of us, we burn a lot of calories through our workouts and our training. So I got to put it back on and and then some. So yeah, ice cream is a big part of that.
I'm not gonna.
Tyler,
I'm kind of jealous.
I was about to say, Tyler, I need the number to your nutritionist, man.
It was a hard fight, man. It was a hard fight.
Yeah, me too. God, I mean, I wish I could eat ice cream every day. That would be so good. Guys, this is super cool, and thank you guys for all sharing your stories. And we'll, what I'll also do is put links to each of your pages and social media accounts in our show notes so that our listeners can go out and learn more about you. So what I'd like to do is move the conversation into getting our listeners a better understanding of what the Paralympic, what a Paralympic athlete is. And, we have a wide variety range of listeners, from young people to professionals to adults and adult influencers. So I think it would be great for the listeners to learn more about what a Paralympic athlete is. So Aaron, if you could help us define what is a Paralympic athlete?
I mean, by definition, I would say a Paralympic athlete is an athlete with a physical disability, and that's kind of, I guess, the most kind of broad definition. I think the confusing part that we still get, despite the Paralympics becoming much more, I would say, mainstream over the last few years, is I still am getting a lot of conflict between Special Olympics and Paralympics, because Special Olympics is more for mental impairments, which a few Paralympic sports actually have kind of mental impairment categories. But for the most part, the Paralympics are for people with some sort of physical disability, and Special Olympics are for mental kind of impairments. But the Paralympics are literally, it's the best of the best, the elite best in the world of people that have some sort of physical limitation.
Outstanding. Thank you. And so, sort of sticking on that topic, Trey, I wanted to ask you, what do you feel is the perception of you as a Paralympic athlete among the general society?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think one of the things that we see as the common misconception of what we do is the fact that they think that we do this as a hobby, almost as if, you're picking up your fishing gear and you're like, if I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna catch fish today, if I catch a big one, I catch it. If I don't, it's just good being on the water. But it's completely different. I mean, just like Aaron said, this is the best of the best athletes. So this isn't just something that we pick up just because it's a hobby. We sit here, we train. Like Tyler said, like there's a nutritional aspect that goes into this. We're sitting here and we want people to see that we're elite athletes at what we do. And this is our sport, For me, this is a journey, like I said, that's been 18 plus years to get to my third Paralympic Games. And we just want people to understand that, our counterparts that you see during the Olympic Games, we're training just as hard as they are to get up on that podium stand and to represent our country. So when you see an individual that's a Paralympic athlete, it's one of those things that you got to respect the athlete, the person that you see in front of them. Just because they have a disability, that doesn't take anything away from their craft that they're mastering.
I completely agree. Like you said, you're a professional athlete, and the great thing about what each of you are doing and all of your teammates is you're inspiring those young kids with disabilities to set their mind that I can do whatever I want in life. I can become a professional athlete or do whatever it is, and there's going to be no obstacles that I can't overcome to get there. And I just think that's so inspiring. Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
Sure, I'll chip in, since, not a whole lot more to add, because honestly, Trey and Aaron, you guys have done a phenomenal job of kind of explaining it. But, at the end of the day, we're out following our dreams. We're living our lives, where we have goals just like everyone else. And the fact that, we have a disability, that doesn't change the fact that we're busting our butts out there. And, there's a side of things. And, Trey and Aaron, if you have any thoughts after I say this, I'd love to hear it too. But, we get called inspirational a lot, and it's kind of a double-edged sword amongst Paralympic athletes or any, individual with a disability, is that when they look at you for your disability and they say you're inspiring, it's kind of like, well, why am I inspiring? Am I inspiring because I'm, I have one leg, or because I'm, in a wheelchair or visually impaired? or am I inspiring because I'm just all around an amazing athlete? I'm following my dreams and goals and pushing myself each day to the limit. On that front, I totally am on board with it. But when you just look at the disability component, that kind of, it's a little hard for us to say, well, yeah, we're inspiring, but why? I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on that, but
I'll chip in on that. I think I totally agree with you, and I think this is a major topic among Paralympic athletes, because I think mainstream society often looks at us more as inspirational stories than elite athletes. And I guess my response to it is, when I go to compete, I go to win. I don't go to inspire people. But if I am able to inspire someone to reach their maximum potential, push themselves to the limit, and become stronger and more resilient, then that I'm super grateful and excited I'm able to do that. I would say that would be somewhat of a similar answer to an Olympic athlete. I would hope that their goal is to win and compete to the best of their abilities, but if they're able to inspire someone along the way, I'm sure that's something that they would love to do.
No, that's 100%. I think the one thing that we're doing as athletes is we're changing the stigma that we've seen surrounded, persons with disabilities for years now, for centuries now, right? When you think of an individual with a disability, when I do other speaking engagements and we ask the kids and the adults in the room, like, what do you envision? And it's always something that's drastic. But now what you're starting to see is that you're starting to see that needle change, and that they're seeing that there are a bunch of disabilities that branch out from more than what you can imagine, and their abilities and what they're doing with their limitations is awesome. I'll give you an example. When people look at me, they look at me and they go, Trey, you're awesome. You play basketball and all about disabilities. But, I counter that. I know about myself. I'm mastering my craft, and I'm attempting to master my craft, I should say, and being the best person that I can be. But, when I go to the Paralympic Games, I'm inspired by, the different athletes that we have around. And that's just speaking for the mastering of our different crafts that you'll see throughout, the Paralympic movement.
Totally agree.
I love all those perspectives. I'm so glad each of you weighed in on that, because that brings me right into sort of the next question I wanted to ask. And I was going to bring this to Tyler, but I think it's something you might all want to weigh in on here, because the question is, do you think that the perception of Paralympic athletes has changed over the past 10 years? And if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with this one, and then you guys can chip in, because I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well. But I think it absolutely has. I mean, let's just look at the media coverage or the social media presence. If you look 10 years ago, you can find Paralympics anywhere. You can find it on TV. You maybe had to dig through the archives online. Maybe there was like a little special promo or something, but that was it. But now, you see ads that it's Olympics and Paralympics. It has both incorporated. They have broadcasting for both. Each games, that coverage increases tremendously. You can obviously see everything online still, but now we're getting that primetime TV notice, commercials, social media presence. I mean, it really has changed and improved over time. And actually, I think you said 10 years, but even in the last, I'd say 5 years, we've noticed a huge change. And it's just really cool to see. I personally think we still have a little ways to go. I think, there's still some work that needs to be done, but we're on the right trend. We're getting some good traction, and I'm honestly very excited for the future of this, just because I know, how far we've come in just a short period of time. And, we still have a ways to go, but I think the future is really bright on that side of things.
That's the one thing that you can definitely see over the time is the media coverage, like 100%. And that was one of the things I was thinking, is just as Tyler was saying it. And what you also see is the sponsorships increasing as well. Like, you're giving athletes the opportunity to, use different brands and their platforms to be able to send out a message that it goes beyond just, you know, one person or one team, but it goes on in an entire movement, right? We're talking about this Paralympic movement that's been going on for decades now, and these corporations are stepping up to the plate and willing to put, you know, individuals with disabilities and Paralympic athletes on the forefront, you know, and that's something that's getting ready to start. I mean, I don't know how many commercials that I've seen leading up to our games, and it's just like, man, we're getting there. And just like Tyler said, you know, this is just the floor right now, right? That just because we're seeing it now doesn't mean that this is what we're going to call and set at the status quo. We need to exceed that and continue growing as a group, as an organization, as a whole.
I think there's no question that the last 5 years, let's say, it's made major strides. I think I've noticed in like Europe and stuff like that, a lot of Paralympic sports, mainstream society knows a lot more about Paralympic sports than in the U.S. It's kind of taken a little longer in the U.S. But now I think it's really starting to grow, especially like they said, with the more kind of companies that are jumping on, but also like the major breakthrough was, you know, now for an Olympic medal versus a Paralympic medal, they're worth the same amount. And so a lot of sports now are like becoming a lot more included. Like in triathlon, we're training a lot more with the Olympic athletes. I mean, maybe not doing the same sets and things like that, but being included a lot more as a team, and no longer it's not U.S. Olympics and U.S. Paralympics, it's U.S. Olympic and Paralympics together, and we're training as a team. So I think that is huge, and I think it's taken a lot of, you know, breaking down barriers with athletes that are Paralympic athletes that are competing and at a level that they would maybe be able to make the Olympic team in their sport. Unfortunately, a lot of the sports and individuals that we, like the wheelchair athletes and things like that, they go on wheels versus on their feet per se. So you're not comparing apples to apples. So I think that's where it's hard sometimes to gauge like how of elite a level athletes we are, because people are wanting to compare, you know. So when we have athletes that compete at an Olympic level, and for example, in the blind category, 1,500 meters in the track, you know, the top 4 guys at the Rio Olympics were faster than the gold medalist in the Paralympics. In my category, were faster than the gold medalist Matthew Centrowitz in the Olympics. Now, not saying that they would beat him at all, but it's that kind of breaking down the barriers to show how elite of athletes that the Paralympics bring. So, and I think just the change in our society of equality in general has really stemmed the change in Paralympic sport.
Yeah, and I appreciate you each sharing your perspectives on that, because I think it's important for people to hear and just understand, you know, the difference, obviously, in the Olympics and the Paralympics. And now, I mean, it sounds like, you know, some of y'all are actually working with your Olympic counterparts, which is awesome. And hopefully that continues. And, you know, in doing my homework, all of you have been very outspoken on this topic, but let's lead with Aaron on this question. But Trey and Tyler, I'd really like to have you weigh in on this. Are there any sports where there's inequity within the sport due to rules of governing the sport that could be changed?
And you're referring to inequity in the rules, not inequity among maybe classes of individuals, correct?
Yeah, or we could talk both.
I think, I guess, 2 sides of it. In Paralympic sport, and I think people also, again, the Paralympics are just as competitive, and the athletes are just as competitive and do whatever it takes kind of to win as the Olympics. So I think, you know, everybody's going to try to get an edge. And so they're going to push the rules to the limit. And so, I mean, there is differences among sports where, you know, in prosthetic categories, individuals will get the longest prosthetic they can in track and field to, you know, get that advantage and things like that. So in terms of inequities in that kind of sense, in my sport right now, it's we have a factor, which I think it's the best system out there, but factor for like the totally blind athletes, because we're all competing in one class versus the partially sighted. So for me, when I compete, I have some vision. So I start 3 minutes and 21 seconds behind the totally blind athletes for a sprint triathlon. And most people know right now, because it's changed every 2 years, but with COVID now it's been 3 years. So most people all know that factor is too much right now and it needs to be reduced, but it's not reduced until every 2 years at this point. So in terms of inequities and differences in kind of, I guess, level playing field, things like that, there's definite differences. And there's also inequities in terms of there's a lot of athletes that on the Paralympic side that are former military like individuals and military vets. And I mean, they've served our country. They, have deserve to be saluted and things like that. But in terms of maybe just inequities, more inequities and opportunities, because there's a lot of opportunities for let's say veterans and military individuals that the people that didn't have their disability from a military incident or weren't involved in the military might not be able to take advantage of, which means, a lot of our sports are really expensive. The equipment's really expensive, and that might be the deterrent of not being able to participate is the expensiveness.
Tyler and Trey, do y'all want to weigh in?
So I think that I don't mean to speak for everyone, but like in the broad scheme of things, that there is a vast majority of athletes that endure some sort of uneven playing field, especially when it comes to like classifications or the way that some of the rules are written. And one of the things that I've seen within our sport is the idea of inclusion and how we've defined inclusion in certain situations. I've seen in different sports individuals get, I don't want to say robbed, but taken. They get the sore end of the stick when it comes to their classification because of wording or because of the way that their disability is perceived and how they're classed. So I just, in a broad sense of things, because I don't want to get into the specifics, but I think that we've all seen some sort of issues in regards to the wording, especially when it comes to classification.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll round this out. This was hammered pretty well, so I don't need to say too much. Trey and Aaron did an excellent job in diving into it. But like they both said, I mean, I think just across the board, and again, I'm not speaking for everyone in the movement, but just from my experience and echoing their, Trey and Aaron's thoughts, is that classification is just such a deep rabbit hole and such a kind of touchy subject, because depending on your sport, you might get classified, you might not. Some sports, are classifiable, some aren't. I mean, Aaron mentioned earlier that his, classification wasn't in Rio, but triathlon was. So I think just across the board, it's hard to say one sport specifically, but I think in general, the whole movement, it works, but it's an imperfect system. There's still a lot of nuances, and I'd actually shifting it quite a bit, shifting it. I think if we're talking about inequality, we still have a long way to go in terms of the support and funding for the Paralympics versus the Olympics. And I mean, this is like a whole, this is a deep rabbit hole that, we don't need to dive too much in, because we could probably spend an hour just talking about this topic. But honestly, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of, getting more funding for our athletes, for our sport programs, so that we can compete at the same, level as our Olympic counterparts. And in some ways, I like to argue that, not only do we have to be, an amazing athlete just like them, but we have to afford our specialized equipment or, push past whatever that physical limitation or impairment is. So, we are, working just as hard, if not harder, but yet we're getting a lot less funding and support. So I just think that's something, we've made progress. There are great strides. There's more sponsorships, more endorsements. I mean, Trey mentioned that earlier, and I'm not trying to knock on that, but still, if we're talking about inequality, we've got a long way to go on that front as well.
So I think everybody listening. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I would just, I guess, if in terms of inequality, it's getting better with what Tyler said, but no question, there is a high percentage of Paralympic athletes that are working part to full-time jobs and, are just barely getting by putting food on the table to continue to compete versus our Olympic counterparts that might have a lot more lucrative contracts and things like that. So I think that is the difference is we have maybe more on our plate in terms of might have to train full time, work part to full time, and still have trouble making ends meet. So I think that's one of the differences that hopefully will get better.
Yeah, because I mean, being a professional athlete is a full-time job plus overtime combined. So I guess as a listener, and as I sit here and listen to you guys talk, how can us as a whole, how can we all come together? How do we change this? I mean, how do we, what can we do to make the change or continue the change that's happening?
So great question. I love this. I would start with saying, watch the Paralympics, like literally just watch it. If it's not on TV, watch it being streamed. We just had the trials going on. A lot of the events were showcased on Peacock, but also I know triathlon, your guys' last qualifier, Aaron, I believe what you guys just finished racing in Wisconsin, right? That was, I think, streamed online. Yeah. So like watch the Paralympics, watch the trials. It's not always easily accessible, but honestly, that's like one of the best ways you can start, because if you're watching it, there's that demand for it, which increases the viewing on a larger global scale, which will also in turn create more endorsements and more sponsorships and more funding for the sports.
Well, what I'd like to do is get some of the platforms that they are streaming the games on, so that we can also put it in the show notes that anybody listening can click down and say, okay, cool. Here's how I want to go watch these guys compete. Here's how I can do so.
Right. I also think that it's important to have the conversation, like this conversation that we're having now, bringing awareness to it. I think that, especially with the Paralympic sports in general, like when you see a sport of our, magnitude, like you're automatically hooked. All right. But now it's about spreading that word, right? It's about getting it out and making sure that it's not lost. One of the things I think, not only just the Paralympics, but in the Olympics as well, in totality, is that like we see this every quad, right? Every 4 years we get excited about this. But what people fail to realize is that this is a 4-year process just to get here. Mm-hmm. Like we're working, we're qualifying, like in this 4 year just to get to this point to say that we're going to be a Paralympian. And so that 3-year buildup before that, people don't see, that excitement is not necessarily there all the time. And so when we have this conversation and people are starting to follow and watch, like Tyler said, like we need to continue bringing in those eyes. We need to continue having these conversations, so that way that our, government, so that way government can step in, that way that companies can step away, corporations can step in and help out with what we were talking about, those monetary issues that we're starting to have to alleviate some of those issues that we're having as professional athletes.
I love that. Aaron, do you have anything to add?
I think the difference too, I think is it's a little harder nut to crack when you're talking about trying to get the U.S. interest versus maybe other countries' interest. We have so many like main like big professional sports, the NBA, the NFL, and all of that kind of stuff that people are so immersed into that maybe we need to do a little bit more inclusion of having Olympic sport athletes with Paralympic sport athletes combined in the same competition, but maybe they have to compete with our sort of attempt to create our limitations to kind of get for general society to get an idea of the elite caliber athletes. It can be a little hard nut to crack for in the U.S. I think, because of all of the attention that maybe the big sports get. So, but it's coming. It's getting a lot better, and I think it will only improve with kind of the ball that we've got started rolling.
You're right. And again, nothing happens overnight. It takes conversations like this, and we're going to get this shared so that, as many people as possible can listen to it and have a better understanding. And they're hearing it from the top Paralympic athletes in the world. But hundreds of young kids look up to each of you. They idolize you. They love watching you compete on TV. So Trey, I want to bring this back to you. What change do you hope to, see and happen in Paralympic sports for future generations? Yeah.
So like, first and foremost, I want to say that like, it is so awesome to be able to, show up to, a local YMCA practice that's having, wheelchair basketball, and these kids are looking up to you because, they've watched you on YouTube and be like, you know what, Trey, you're my role model. Like, growing up and playing basketball, I never thought that would be something that I would be able to see, being able to just, show up to a practice just to, hang out with a couple kids just because they're local here in Virginia, and they're just loving every bit of it. And that's something that touches me, and it touches home because that means that like we're impacting the game, but we're impacting our youth. We're being role models, mentors for that next generation of athletes. One of the things that I hope to see is the bulk of opportunity for, athletes to be able to participate in sports. I think that, sometimes it's difficult to get into sports. Like for me, my closest team, I lived in Maryland at the time. My closest team was in Washington, D.C. Sometimes if you're in the Midwest, you're probably traveling hours before you get to, a Paralympic sport. So having the resources to be able to allow, the next generation of athletes to try sports, but not just one sport, because like we've been saying, a bunch of us have played a bunch of different sports. You don't know what your niche is if you don't have the opportunity to, excel. One of the things that you see is a bunch of AAU games and kids starting to play at, like my daughter, she's 5, and they have soccer leagues already at the age of 5. Are we having these same opportunities for those kids with disabilities? And that's just something that I want to see moving forward.
I like that. Are you guys seeing more youth sports that could prepare young kids for, the Paralympic Games?
I think, generally high schools have, and again, this is just generalizing. This is not like, I don't want someone to say, oh, my high school doesn't do that. But I have heard from friends like in track and field and, swimming and other sports that high schools are being a bit more open, a little better about bringing in, athletes with disabilities. Maybe this isn't like a straight trajectory to the Paralympics, but at least including them, getting them involved, giving them a place to go. We still obviously have a lot of work to do, but I think it's getting better. And I feel like that's kind of our, our conversation is things are getting better. We still have a long way to go, but there are opportunities out there. Like Move United is an amazing nonprofit that, basically provides sport opportunities for individuals with disabilities. A lot of these, they're one of the first camps that I went to as a skier. They were called Disabled Sports U.S.A. once upon a time. And they had a ski camp in Breckenridge, fell in love with it, and, kind of stuck with it. But they have these different sport opportunities, and there's a bunch more nonprofits like that, organizations out there. That's just one that I personally have worked with. But, it's out there, but there's also a little bit of, you have to go out, you have to search for it. You have to really kind of dive in. And I think that's where, we can work on a little bit.
I think one thing that would maybe help, just because what we need, and I guess like physical education teachers, that might be one of the best, because pretty much everybody takes PE at some point in their lifetime, but maybe if they included in the education of physical education teachers, where they all learned like just a big, list of organizations, or got a huge list of organizations and who these organizations helped, so that when they had a kid in class or whatever, that they could say, they don't have to know about all these organizations, but they could say, hey, just so you know, I know you're in a wheelchair, but here's all the organizations that help all, wheelchair people in wheelchairs in all of these sports. But that doesn't happen right now because maybe it happens every once in a while, but I'd probably be very surprised if many PE teachers knew organizations to direct their, students that have disabilities too. And so it ends up going typically to either the individual or their parents.
Yeah. More resources, really more education.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and again, they wouldn't even have to know anything about the organization if they just had a list of all the organizations and kind of who those organizations helped and the sports. And then at least they could start the broadening process. And I think that we could develop so many more, Paralympic athletes, because we would just educate so many more people on the opportunities.
Yeah, I want to send a shout out, because now that you said that, Aaron, it reminded me of a situation. A professor, Kathy McKay, she's down at James Madison, and she has what's called like a Paralympic Day. And during her kinesiology course, what she has is these up and coming educators participate in like different Paralympic events, whether that be wheelchair basketball, sitting volleyball, goalball, just a bunch of different events, whether they can experience it for themselves. I don't know how many times I've participated in this for like, I want to say like 4 years prior to the pandemic, and it's had an everlasting effect on those students. So just being able to put them in our shoes, and I know we said this earlier, but if we could put them in our shoes just for a split second to see what it's like to be that Paralympic athlete, like I think that it would move minds. And then not only that, it might even take that educator and be like, maybe one day when they're teaching as a teacher, to be like, maybe we should have a Paralympic Day where the educational curriculum for that day is Paralympic sports.
Exactly.
It gives people perspective, and I love that. And one of the perspectives I'd love to give, and you guys have touched on this a little bit, and one of you were even talking about, okay, look, I mean, we only compete once every 4 years, and athletes at all levels work hard, they train hard. What does a training regimen look like for you when you're comparing for your next competition? I mean, if you can each briefly explain sort of what goes into your sport and your training and your nutrition just to get ready for your next competition.
This is the question I was most excited for. Not that the other ones weren't good, but this is honestly one of my favorite things to talk about. So,
me too.
So Trey and Aaron, I'll try hard not to hog the mic too much on this one. But obviously, I've already talked about my love for ice cream. That was like the first thing I said, I think, or one of the first things and it holds true. Like I really do maintain that, it's a big part of my plan, but mostly because I love ice cream. And before I dive into like the nuts and bolts of my training and my nutrition, I think we can all agree is that you have to be having fun, but you also have to have something that you enjoy and that helps get you through that. So ice cream is kind of my like one vice. I don't really eat candy. I don't drink soda, but ice cream is my thing. That's what I'm like hooked on. But in order to eat the amount of ice cream I do, which some nights is a pint, other nights don't ask me how much I eat, but I have to be able, I have to work my bum off in the gym, outside of the gym, so that I'm physically ready to go. And then I can afford to kind of eat like that. So for me, I have a couple strength workouts a week, which I'm always trying to change up kind of what it is and, what I'm doing, whether it's, squats or deadlifts, which personally are my favorite. Deadlifts, I absolutely love them, even though a lot of people hate them. They're just my favorite thing in the world to do. Any strength workout, it's kind of my favorite thing. I hate cardio, which, sorry, Aaron, I know that's your deal. Trey, I know there's cardio with wheelchair basketball, but I despise cardio. And that's probably why I'm a skier, because it's just downhill. I let gravity do all the work, but I still have to do it. Like, it's still part of my training. So I have interval-based cardio where it's usually I can tolerate the spin bike or the rower. Those are kind of the two things I don't mind as much. But, kind of doing set intervals, on and off periods, some core mixed in there. But my favorite thing I love doing is I make these crazy little circuits. Well, they're sometimes not little, but where I take hurdles and Bozu balls and boxes and basically whatever I can find in the gym. And I just make an obstacle course where I have to go through. I either have to like throw something or crawl under something, hop over something. I just kind of make these insane things. And that's what I love to do. Besides just being an athlete and, preparing for the games, like I love pushing myself to the limits. I love pushing in the gym. So I'm constantly trying to evolve my programming to, work with my team to make sure we're doing everything we can, but always keeping my body kind of on its toes and guessing. But it's a lot of fun, and it hopefully prepares me for the winter, where my training program changes a lot when I'm on snow, because I'm not on snow as much in the off season, the summertime. And then nutrition, super simple. I try to eat as much as I can. Like I try to eat a healthy, well-balanced meal, a good balanced with everything, but I just try to eat as much as I can to replenish those calories. And I'm done. That's it. Aaron, Trey, the mic is yours. Sorry for going on that ice cream related rant. And chocolate's my favorite, by the way. I don't know if I ever mentioned that.
Okay,
Chocolate
good.
Ice cream, best out there.
That was actually my next question, because I'm sure everybody is dying to know, like, what kind of ice cream do you like?
Yep, chocolate all the way.
Okay.
Brand wise, I'm pretty easygoing though. If you're ever in Colorado Springs, Josh and John's is some of the best ice cream I've ever had. So just a note on that. And Trey, I know you're coming soon, so if they let you off campus, check it out.
You know what? And I was about to say, you're a man after my heart. You know, for me, it's definitely like a pastry, like for dessert.
Oh, yeah.
I think, you know what? I'm convinced now that Olympic and Paralympic athletes, the sweet tooth is just crazy. I don't do candies and sodas just like yourself, but the pastries is the best part of it. Yeah. But no, Tyler, yeah, you know what? I'm a sprinter myself, man. So like, if we can keep it short, quick, I'm always good for that. Anything, even when I was in track, anything above 400, I was out. So, but my training day is, it's kind of unique, right? Because I'm on a team of 12 guys that are located throughout the United States. So it's a lot of, you know, one-on-one solo training by yourself. And then like we get together this week together to train for a couple of days. And then we go back home to our respective bases. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I'm here at home, I'll wake up at, you know, 5:30 to get to the gym at 6. I'll put my 2 hours in at the gym before coming home and taking care of the kids, you know, getting things ready. And then I'll work my 9 to 5:30 shift, and then it's family time from 5:30 until, you know, bedtime, which is at 8 o'clock. And then you know, it's mommy daddy time for about an hour, and then we go downstairs in our own personal gym where we do cardio and some weightlifting as well before we start that process all over again. And then when we're together as a team, we run, you know, 3 hours practice session twice a day, not including our lifting session and our video session. Mm-hmm. So it's a grind, but it's something that I earn for. You know, when I'm here at home, it's a constant reminder. You know, those other 11 guys that are training, you know, you got to kick it up in high gear for them. And then when you're with them competing, it's like that competition level that, you know, that you wish you had at home. So you got to take advantage of it while you're there. So that's one of the things that I'm grateful for sure in my training and my competition.
For me, I'll make it short. I think my training regimen has totally changed over time with and probably for Trey too, with you know, being married and having 2 kids. I've being, you know, this is 21 years I've been doing triathlons, so it's definitely become probably the least amount of training I can do, but to knowing that I can be on top of my game. So I've been able to, you know, I make sure that I leave no stone unturned. And so I know, you know, the courses that I'm doing, I know what I need for those courses versus maybe other courses, and tailor my training along with that. It's typically, I kind of get more training in bulks, like 3 days where I do 3 to 4 hours, and then days where I just do, you know, 60 minutes. But then I also have to coordinate with my guide who I race with, because we really need to be working together as a team. So we kind of do training camps. So in that sense, it's kind of like a team sport, like basketball. Now we have to do, you know, training camps when we get together and meet up and train. But I think over the years, it's just become the least amount of training you do to keep up to where you need to be, because, you know, also as you're getting older and stuff like that, your body's changing and what it can withstand and all that.
And Aaron, you never know when your kid's gonna have a bad day, man. That can throw some things off.
Yeah, you know, actually, sometimes I also include what I do with my kids as part of into my training.
Yeah. That's neat.
Yeah.
My wife and I are expecting our first in August, so kind of excited.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. So it's real hot here in Texas. She's at that point where she's getting uncomfortable. We got about a month or so left. So I was like, man, I couldn't do it. I was like, you're way tougher than I am. But I wanted to wrap up our discussion, you know, and be sure that we're honoring your time by allowing you to impact those who are listening by giving them some of what your experiences have taught you, because you've all made it to the pinnacle of your sport through hard work and dedication that we've talked about during this discussion. And each one of you have had many obstacles in your way, but you've made it to the top either way, and you've been successful in overcoming many, if not all of those obstacles. So to all of those athletes out there who are disabled but want to compete in the Paralympics, what advice would you give to each of them? And we'll start with Aaron, then Trey, we'll go to you, and Tyler, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, sounds good. For me, I would say, a few things. I think we all, no matter disability or not disability, we're going to have challenges in life, and people with some sort of major disability are probably going to have more challenges. And so just realizing that, learning how to be resilient and knowing that it's a learned ability. It's not something that, you're born with or you're not born with. And so just knowing that being resilient is learned, and, it's learned through figuring things out through hardships. And I think also just knowing that we all have different abilities, but we all have the same, we all have different potentials, but we all have the same ability to kind of reach our own given potential. So although, Trey might have a way higher potential at wheelchair basketball than another individual, we all have the same ability to kind of strive for our own potential. And so I think just, and knowing that although, it might look like we've gotten to the top and everything is good, it's really, it may look like that, but it's come through a lot of hard work, hardships, and challenges on our own part that we've had to kind of just figure out.
Yeah, I love that transparency.
I agree 100% with what Aaron said. And I think one of the things that I have to push for sure is you got to make sure you find something that you love what you do, because I think at the end of the day, we all love what we do, and you try to take that away from us, it's going to be a fight. It's definitely going to be a fight.
Yeah.
I'll tell a brief story so I then go over, after we got back from the Rio Games, I looked at Laura and the kid, and I was like, hey, listen, I'm going to take a month off. I'm not going to touch a weight. I'm not going to touch basketball. I'm just going to take time away from the sport. So we go on a little family holiday, and it was about a week long. We get back, and I started getting the itch again. Like, hey, I need to go at the gym. Like, I'm missing the gym. I want to shoot a basketball. I need to lift a weight or something. And it's just because I love what I do. And I'm pretty sure, with Aaron and Tyler, they love what they do. It's hard to take them out of that atmosphere. So when it becomes something that you love to do and something that's fun, it's easier to continue mastering your craft. When it starts to become like a chore or something that you feel like it's daunting, those are the times that it becomes difficult. But not saying that, we don't face our difficult levels, because it comes through time and time again. And we have to also learn from our wins and our losses, just as much from our losses than we do our wins. But find something you'd love to do, because at the end of the day, that's the easiest path to making sure that, for sustaining longevity and the things that you love.
That's solid advice.
All right. Well, I guess I'm here to give my 2 or 25 cents of this. Try not to hog the mic again, like I'm known for. But in Trey and Aaron, you guys, I loved hearing your thoughts on this. I thought that was really great perspectives. Like all of us, times have been challenging. It hasn't been the easiest year. I like to think I'm, kind of the wisest I've been in my career, but also I'm the most tired I've ever been. I'm, working a full-time job, my friends here, I don't have a family, but I basically, like Trey was saying, waking up at 5:30 to go to the gym. I'm like, oh shoot, that's me tomorrow. During the work week, that's what I do. I'm up bright and early to get my workout in, to get that work done, and then go grinding it out at work so that I can afford to do all this. So it's not, it's rarely easy. And I think that's important to remember, is that the things in life that have the most value, that, you love, that are the most important, they're not usually easy, but they're so worth it. And, remembering that and having that in mind with your grind, and, when you don't want to go to the gym, when you, don't want to do X, Y, and Z, or, your friends are going out and you're like, no, I'm actually going to stay in tonight. It's, you got to keep that in mind. And, it's it's a struggle, but it can be a really good struggle, and you can find a lot of enjoyment in that. And I think at the end of the day, the most important thing to remember is to not give up on your dreams and your goals. And then when you find a passion, when you know you want to do something in life, make every decision matter. Every decision that you do in life, how is that going to help you accomplish that dream or goal? And I'm not a betting man, but I would put a lot of money on if you have that attitude and that mindset, things are going to work out pretty well for you. It's a crazy journey trying to go to the Olympics or Paralympics, and Trey and Aaron and I, we all have our stories and our journey, but I think we can all agree it's been a very rewarding experience. But at the end of the day, it's all about finding your passion and what you want to do in life. And if you find that, then you're doing pretty good.
You're right. And that's just such solid advice from each of you. And I can't thank you guys enough for taking time out of your busy schedules. And I know you guys are busy, and just to come and share your stories and your thoughts and having this just open, amazing, transparent discussion with us on the All Me podcast. I've really enjoyed my time. I wish we all had 2 or 3 hours, because I'm a talker and I love listening and I love hearing stories, and I could spend another couple hours with the three of you guys. But I just wanted to thank you again on behalf of the Taylor Hooten Foundation for joining us for this True Sport series. And, best of luck this year, and continue to work hard.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks. It's been a blast.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooten Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances, and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.